Hello everyone, welcome to the Ahdurin region. I'm your host Ahdurin himself. Welcome to another episode of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team Starter Study Series, where we're going through and finding which starter combination is truly the best with an abstract rule set that you can check out in the description down below. While you're down there, leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all those things you ought to do in supporting a YouTube channel. Also, I'm going to mention this a little bit earlier because some people check it out, some people don't. If you've got a starter combination you want to do, then you can just let me know in the comment section down below. From this point forward, at least, any sort of starter studies that we'll be doing going forward will be based on the recommendations that individuals have. So if you really want one, we'll go through it. I'm going to compile this and the previous one that I've done before, try to figure out which combination people really want to see. We'll eventually go through all of them, but if you want to see yours first, you just leave it in the comment section down below. As you can tell by the Pokemon on the screen there, we're going with the Charmander Squirtle combination. Now this one, again, just like the first one I did, was kind of just me going through the quiz, seeing what happens, answering it legitimately, and then figuring out which Pokemon showed up. Got Charmander here, and I thought, hey, why not go for Squirtle, the Fire-Water combo that most people tend to see, the Generation 1 Pokemon, the starter Pokemon, a lot of people tend to use. Going into this challenge here, initial thoughts, the Machop Trico run went pretty well. You can check that out again in the playlist. There should be the video showing up on recommendations and all that sort of stuff, if you haven't checked it out, of course. And I think that this could be better. If you know the Pokemon that show up in this game and the bosses that show up in this game, it's a lot of birds, which was not very good for my grass type and fighting type combination I used last time. This time, we've got a little bit of a better shot here. The big Pokemon I'm worried about are Moltres, which Squirtle can beat, are Articuno, which Charmander can beat. Zapdos is sort of a concern for Squirtle, but usually the Zapdos, I think, of the three legendary birds is probably the easiest to deal with. And then, of course, as you go later on in the game, you got to deal with Groudon, which is, of course, not the best when it comes to this particular team. You prefer to have a grass type as opposed to having a fire type. And then, of course, Rayquaza, so that's going to be theoretically difficult as well. We named our team Generation 1, Team Gen 1, because of course we're choosing the Gen 1 starters that most people tend to choose. Leave in the comment section below, what was your Generation 1 starter? I think mine was Squirtle, technically speaking. I tend not to use Charmander too much. I lean more Squirtle and Bulbasaur. I tend to lean the water and grass types in general, but at the very least, leave whatever you have. I'm eager to see what Pokemon most people tend to use here. So let us continue forward. Most of the early game stuff, as unsurprising as it may seem, the fact that we're multiple levels above all of the enemies that we have to face, Tiny Woods, Thunderwave Cave, even most sections of Mount Steel aren't too difficult. So we can kind of just zoom past this and move on to our next section. One quick thing that I want to mention actually while we're here, you might notice the move sets that we've got. Tackle, Tail Whip on one side, Growl, Scratch on the other, and Growl, Scratch is from me specifically. This is an interesting test, and this is the first time we get to actually properly determine what's better, lowering defenses or lowering attack of opponents, as Bond here learns Bubble. By the way, if you can understand why Bond is the nickname here, you get bonus points. You can know either the logical reason behind it or my personal reason as to why Bond is the nickname. Bonus points for you if you can figure that out. At the very least, though, this is interesting because one thing we do allow in this challenge are linked moves. And linking moves could be very beneficial. Obviously, you can use moves at the same time. You get stacked effects. But Growl versus Tail Whip, the impact of lowering attack versus lowering defenses, how different does that make the game play out? We can find out as we learn Ember here as well. This is going to be helpful going forward. We'll definitely level up to the point where we'll start to get some decent moves. Question is how far we go, because obviously the higher we level up, the easier the game theoretically gets, but the more time we spend. And of course, while this isn't a speed run, I'm not very good at speedruns at all. This is certainly a let's see if we can beat the game fast type of run. And so we'll try to take advantage of finding that balancing act in between leveling up too much versus actually getting the stats what we need. Going back to that attack versus defense point, it's an interesting point that we'll have to take a focus on going forward, and it'll adjust the way that I play through the game as we move along. Also saving Magnemites. Yay! So, as we reach Treasure Town on the next day, the first thing, the obvious thing that we do at this point is get those moves set up. We've got Growl, Scratch, and Ember on this side, Tackle, Tail Whip, Bubble on the other, and so we want to link the moves up to be proper. We linked Tail Whip, Tackle. This is similar to the combination we did in the previous video, and then Growl, Scratch here. Again, testing out whether lowering attack versus lowering defenses, which one is better, which one will actually help us going forward with our specialized rule set, again, in the description down below. We also store our items as a reminder. We cannot bring items into a dungeon unless it's later on, at which point we're allowed to bring an apple or two in case we, get run out on stamina purposes. I didn't want to deal with that. So that's again, all this is available in that rule set down below. From here, we do the missions, we go through, we continue with our tasks, and move on from here. After a day of missions, we go to Mount Steel, where we're going to save a Diglett that's been kidnapped by a Skarmory. Skarmory, generally, it is considered the first boss fight. While I used to have troubles with it in the past, as I have learned more about the game and or gotten better and or became an adult, it has gotten significantly easier to deal with. And on top of that as well, Skarmory is going to be very easy to work with when you have a Charmander that can use Ember. Fire-type move will do a lot of damage here. We're taking a lot of points of damage, though, as well. You might have noticed that Zigzagoon did a lot of damage there. Aeron, I think, will survive that one, so it's not too big of an issue. But Pokemon can certainly deal a lot of damage to us. Our defense is not particularly high. We do have range moves. Bubble is fantastic for that purpose there. And Squirtle is significantly more defensive than I am, at least. So I try to make sure that Squirtle's the one either getting hit or taking the hits on the team while we do additional damage here. The Bubble, the advantage of having the slowing ability as well, making sure that the opponent skips every other turn in effect, or going less often, is definitely helpful as well. So Squirtle, underrated move, Bubble, because of its impact going forward. Could be useful, especially when we get to those boss fights. Bubble could be helpful there. Speaking of boss fights, as we reach the 9th floor, we go over and find Diglett, who is stuck on the other side of this cavern here. Skarmory complaining about earthquakes happening, and clearly it's Diglett and Dugtrio specifically. Time to fight. We've learned Withdraw on Squirtle as well, which could be helpful. The Growl will lower attack, which is certainly helpful as well, because we don't really have many throwing items at this point in the game. Blast Seed for 30 points of damage. Bubble does a lot. Sand Attack, Ember, easy game, set, and match. We continue with the game from here. Again, Skarmory, not too hard to deal with, especially with super effective moves, and Skarmory doesn't have a lot of health, especially when compared to most of the foes later on. We talk about Diglett having feet, because I have to mention that every time I do a Blue Rescue Team video. And so with that officially being said, I assume Dugtrio has feet as well, and the fact that we've spent multiple minutes, or seconds at least, on Dugtrio and Diglett's feet means that I have accomplished my goal when it comes to Blue Rescue Team propaganda. Also, we asked Magnemite to try to join the team. We meet up with Wigglytuff and all that fun stuff. We continue with that. Again, game, not very hard. We're pretty much on pace with the other challenge I've done so far. Not many of these, this point, is complicated. It's later on that I've got to worry about. For now, though, smooth sailing. Also, dreams are happening, because that's a thing. You know how this is. You played this game before. We continue with additional missions and proceed forward. We meet up with Shiftry as well, which is also interesting. We're getting a bunch of Reviver Seeds, which are ultimately not going to be useful. Gravel Rocks, though, definitely are useful. And we continue to the next day as we wake up a nice, bright, shining morning. All seems well in the world, and we meet up with some brand new friends like Gengar and Ekans and Metachan. What some nice oh, wait, they're stealing my mail. They're committing a federal crime. They're talking about how using a rescue team to have world domination, which, I'll be honest, not sure how you're going to do that with 3 Pokemon versus, everybody, because Team ACT is there. But you know what? I hope your dreams are as successful as they ought to be, which you can take as you wish. Feel free to do what you want to do there. Rescue teams continue, missions are completed as well, and we proceed over to the next day, right about now, any moment now. Wait for it, boom, right there. Love how the next morning shows up a sign that actually things are progressing forward. Also, the partner not immediately being outside your door here. Caterpie's got a friend named Metapod who's stuck in a forest. Well, Caterpie goes to us for the job. Gengar and squad decides, hey, why don't we do a race? And a race for to save a Pokemon, which I guess, sure, not a terrible idea. Cool. Let's go to Sinister Woods then. Sinister Woods, indeed, a dungeon that isn't as bad. I think, honestly speaking, Sinister Woods might be better for us in this situation. We can deal super effective damage on most of the grass-type Pokemon that are here, and then for those that aren't grass-types, like the Sudowoodo, we have Bubble/Squirtle on that side that can actually do a lot of damage. And so, we can progress forward in Sinister Woods without too much of an issue, right? Again, Sudowoodo being complicated for me, but Squirtle can handle. Most of the grass-types complicated for Squirtle, but I can handle. It seems fine. We got Swine up here, which actually both of us are able to handle. Sunflora is kind of the hard one to deal with, just making sure that we can actually deal the damage there. You notice, though, a lot of defenses. There are a lot of defensive attacks, basically. Long story short, Charmander does not have the greatest defensive stats, especially for this point in the game, which could lead to a little bit of complication when taking hits. The fact that we can go first, very helpful, but we got to make sure we can deal the hits, because once we do, then we got to worry about them dealing the hits on us, which is probably going to be a little bit more complicated to deal with. We are able to get through without too much of an issue, reaching Sinister Woods floor number 13, only to find that Team Meanies is showing up here to fight us to save a child, which I guess I would understand it if they weren't fighting another team trying to save the child. But anyway, set up bubbles on one end. We got the growl to do the lowering of attacks on the other. The bubble across is definitely helpful. And from here, I'm just going to keep embering, trying to deal as much damage as we can. Squirtle's got the setup there. Curse is not going to be beneficial, though. The ember, additional damage being dealt. This is going to put us to sleep, meaning that it's all kind of on Squirtle. Metacham is down. We're down on red health. This doesn't look particularly good here. And the wrap finishes us off, which means that that's Feint number 1. Now, I won't be keeping track of all of them live via voice here, but I do keep track of them for my own sake off-screen, I guess is the best way to describe it. So take number 2 against Team Meanies. Ideally, we just get better luck here. That's pretty much the big idea there. We growl to lower the attack. Bubble slowing down Ekans is actually beneficial. That pushes Ekans to the back, meaning that we'll actually only have to take on 2 people as opposed to 3. Certainly beneficial there. I growl and scratch here, trying to gang up on Metacham here. Fire Punch on me isn't great. The Curse by Gengar does mean I'm cursed, obviously. Now I'm just going to go target Gengar from here. Metacham goes down. We level up because we went through a little bit differently, boosting us up slightly higher as a result. Take a step down, brings Gengar out of it. Going over here, now it's 2-on-1. We get wrapped here, which means we can't really do much, but the Ember is able to knock out Ekans for the victory here. We find Metapod as well, which is meaning that all is well that ends well. Let us continue on with our adventure from here. We enter into Silent Chasm, the first dungeon that I start to get concerned a little bit about. Sinister Woods, it depends on the team. This is one where I start to get, a little bit questionable about, because this is where you start to see Pokemon that can use Fury Attack and, moves that can deal a lot of damage at once. And Pokemon like Farfetch'd, which is always concerning. Quick Attack shows up like by Yanma. Again, dealing that distance damage that isn't beneficial. Gravel Rocks, though, we start to find them more often now, which is going to be really helpful going forward. Having that distance ability on our side is going to be helpful, especially since we won't be getting too much of that. We won't be getting real benefits of distance moves on our end, at least. It's going to be mainly the bubble that Squirtle has that'll be beneficial there. So this, in conjunction with the fact that we're starting to get a little bit more complicated dungeons here, the Special Band is great for Squirtle. And from here, we continue forward, trying to find those items, trying to get that benefit. As a reminder, we can have one held item on us as we enter into a dungeon, which is really going to be helpful once we find those bands that are pretty common once you reach this point in the game. We find and save Jumpluff only for Shiftry to be kidnapped by Zapdos, the first real boss of concern, in my opinion. Though Team Meanies, I think, in both of these challenges so far, has caused us issues as well. But the dungeon itself is a little bit more complicated. This is the first one that has that midpoint section. On top of that, a lot of Pokemon like Cacnea here just have a lot of health points. That is always concerning. A lot of electric types doesn't really help us, with Squirtle being weak to them. But there is a decent chance that we can get through things as well. Also, this isn't beneficial either, having Nidorans and Nidorinos and Nidorinas and all those Pokemon that can poison us. Not great. Poison Point, always very annoying in these games, because then you're just walking around dealing 2 points of damage, or 4 points actually in this generation. Electabuzz always is very powerful as well. Look at that A attack did 10 points of damage. The Water Gun, very helpful. Now we've got multiple Water-type moves, which will be beneficial for us. Again, more moves that can deal damage is obviously better. And we've got the Special Band on Squirtle that'll deal additional damage as well. So Squirtle's definitely going to be more of the attacker, especially if we can get the good type matchups that we need. We continue through Mount Thunder, though, without too much complication, as we reach the boss. We reached the peak of Mount Thunder. Now, of course, this is one of those dungeons. This is actually this is the only dungeon where your partner rushes up instead. I do the strategy of getting away. I think watching a speedrun later, I think stepping to the side actually allows your partner to walk backwards. So maybe I'll try that going forward. I step back as well to just make sure that Zapdos follows me. If Zapdos goes for agility at either of these points, it's a problem, which is why it's a little bit more risky. From here, we go a little bit in trying to lower attacks. We got the Tail Whip to lower defenses, and then both of us using our standard normal type moves. We're just trying to keep Zapdos' damage at a low. Problem is, a Thunder Shock at any point can knock one of us out. Thunder Wave here is not beneficial either, and now it becomes a strategy of trying to figure things out. Thunder Wave, however, doesn't prevent us from throwing items, so we try to use those Gravel Rocks. Thunder Wave doesn't work on Squirtle, which is great. Eating an Orange Berry heals me up a little bit. We deal critical hit damage there. There's a shot here. Hold up, can we beat Zapdos on the first try here? I'm going for, trying to find the strategy here, which one's best. I just let Squirtle kind of pick which one's best for them. Ember, Water Gun for big damage. Thunder Shock, though, knocking out Bond meaning take 2 needs to be done here. As we continue forward, though, we get knocked out by an Electabuzz here, which certainly isn't beneficial, meaning we got to try again. Those random ones are always the worst when you have to see them, just because you're not prepared for them. You prepare for, like, the boss fights to be complicated. Not for situations like this where you get ganged up on by multiple Pokemon and have to, like, realign yourself so that both of you are able to attack. It's the worst. Though I suppose technically the worst would be monster houses and stuff like that. Anyway, back to Zapdos again. This is try number 2. Again, eventually I'll learn. I don't think in this challenge I did it. I think I was continuing the getaway here. But we'll reset from there. Going forward, I'll at least use a slightly more accurate strategy here. Again, trying to lower the stats here. The Growl, Tackle, Tail Whip, Scratch, it's vice versa actually. That combination is beneficial to lower Zapdos' stats here. The A attack by Zapdos, trying to get that lower as well, though it's still dealing significant damage here. We get a Thunder Shock here, knocking us out means we got to try again. Now, you might have noticed, we've tried again a couple times. We'll be trying again a couple more times. You're going to continue to see this getaway strategy here. I throw a Gravel Rock this time, seeing if maybe we can deal additional damage. The problem is the agility there basically destroys any shot we have of success, so I just reset at that point. Agility, as a reminder, in this game allows the Pokemon to speed up, but since speed isn't really a stat here, it allows their movement speed to increase. Basically, the number of turns you get per turn. Obviously, most of the time it's 1. If you get slowed by Bubble, for example, that means it cuts in half, so you get effectively 1 movement every 2 turns, which is definitely beneficial when you're on the offensive, not beneficial when you're the one slowing down. And agility can allow you to move multiple times per turn. I think with the maximum of 4 agilities, or 4 stages up, 4 times speed, means that you could theoretically do 4 attacks at once or something along those lines. Anyway, it's a long, complicated situation that we definitely don't want to deal with. I tried throwing the Gravel Rock here. The agility there is not helpful by any stretch of the imagination. I just gotta hope you don't knock me out. We go for a Growl Scratch. Thunder Shock knocks out partner, meaning that's a problem there. And in fact, we're going to be dealing with a few more of these issues. Zapdos was significantly tougher for me on this run-through than it was for the Machop Trico line. Now, it might have been because of the setup we had there. We were able to lower defenses twice with both Trico and Machop. And then the focus energies and all those other items. The Leer attack combination there could have been helpful. Machop had a stab move as well, which could have been helpful, despite the resistance that Zapdos has. On the other hand, here, when we want to lower stats, the way we've got it set up currently means that we're lowering stats while doing a normal type move attack, which could be beneficial. We're only getting 1 Leer off as opposed to 2. There's a few different items there that are kind of causing a little bit of struggle. We'll try another attempt here. Let's see if we're a little bit successful. Squirtle rushes up, and now we proceed to go. Basically, we got to hope for no agility is the big thing. So if we get an agility, it's going to be almost impossible to win. Let's try this out here. Gravel Rock, step back, try moving forward. No agility so far. I'm going to set Water Gun or Bubble. I think I set Bubble for the slow potential chance. Ember here. I'm going to start to go for stab moves now, seeing this is beneficial. We're going against our strategy of lowering attack. We're just going for the stab moves from here. Gravel Rock for 20 points. Thunder Shock knocks me out, though. We had to find a successful strategy eventually, right? I mean, theoretically, of course, we're publishing this video, so either it's impossible or not, and clearly we have a lot of levels that we could level up to if it was impossible at this level. But we try again. Here we go. Gravel Rock, step back. Let's go together and try I step back. No agility this time. That's helpful. We go back to our strategy of using those status moves. I go for Growl to lower the attack. We're trying to get Zapdos slowed down. And then Thunderwave missing helpful as well, because obviously there's no effect from there. We're just going to keep lowering your attack. I'm trying to get the speed slow. The pack does 29 damage there. We get a critical hit on that Scratch right there. A attack is helpful. Bubble, I think we're almost in range if we're not in range yet. We're very close to being in range for Torrent to take effect. So it's a debate of whether or not I want that to happen or not. I decide to be a little risky. Go for Ember. Water Gun. 22 points of damage there. We got the slow earlier, meaning that we can skip turns. Thunder Wave, Water Gun, Ember, Water Gun again, missed. Now we're really cooking here. Ember, knockout, game, set, match. What a victory there. Complicated indeed, but we were eventually successful, meaning we can finally move on to the rest of the story and moving to a non-boss battle dungeon here, which is going to be very, very helpful as well. Of course, all this plot stuff happens, which, yeah, you guys know about, but now it is time for us to move forward into our next dungeon. Now, the Great Canyon, of course, and the Hill of the Ancients itself, I think this is slightly easier, and I think the fact that we've got a combination of Charmander and Squirtle here is pretty helpful as well. We're dealing a lot of damage now, especially with those water-type moves that Squirtle's got. I'm honestly just kind of along for the ride. Doduo can get a little complicated, though, with the quick attacks. Being a flying type is generally strong for some reason in this game, just in general. Um, I'm not sure why. It might just be the fact that they can do the quick attacks and the pecks and stuff that's always been complicated for me. But they're certainly stronger there. Skiploom, not too much of a concern, I'll be honest, and we can continue along with that. This dungeon, much easier than we had to deal with. There's no boss fight at the end, so we can kind of just smooth sail from here. Just make sure we collect those experience points that are quickly going to become important. You might have noticed as well by the level ups here. I'm level 12, partner's level 14. That's a trend early on. I think Charmander, the level up scales are different in this game in the sense of who's strong or like who levels up quickly and slowly. It's not the same. I think most starters are in the same grouping for the most part. Not necessarily the case here. I think Charmander is actually one of the Pokemon that levels up the slowest and requires the most experience points. I can provide more additional details. In fact, you might see it in a pinned comment on the top, or if you guys know about it, feel free to let me know and I'll heart the comment and mention that as well. Because the level ups and experience curves here are definitely different than they are in the main series games, making it a little harder for Pokemon like Charmander to level up quickly, especially early game. So you'll notice this discrepancy here kind of gets resolved as we go later on, but right now there's going to be that like 1 or 2 level gap for a while. Also, we're running out of embers because I'm using them very quickly. I got to learn how to manage that a little bit better as we continue on with this challenge. Oh, and we fainted. Huh. So the Great Canyon is very hard and complicated to deal with, and yeah, we don't necessarily want to. Vileplume is difficult, okay, and I don't want to deal with Vileplume or any of these Pokemon for that matter. For some reason, we're not able to knock them out. Anyway, so the Great Canyon, little complicated. We eventually get through though. Eventually, and I do mean eventually, we lost to a Tauros actually previously. We get through to the point where I had to break my own moves, use a link box that I found in the dungeon to reconnect them, just because we were using them so much. Eventually though, we reach the Hill of the Ancients and meet up with Xatu. A lot of plot stuff happens here, so we'll just cut through it real quick. Little brief summary here. So first off, meeting up with Xatu. Xatu talks about the world's destruction with Gengar overhearing and then using that information to not help us. Wishcash follows up by telling the story about a legend that sounds vaguely like it could be my past life, which is not great, especially if that human is me, because that could be a problem. Gengar decides to go town crier, talking about, hey, that legend in the past is now here, the unthinkable will occur. Why, everybody, we can solve this issue now. All we have to do is get rid of a certain Charmander right over there, who just happens to potentially theoretically correlate, and we can't necessarily disprove it. So Gengar and Lombre and all these folks decide to charge at us, and that's not good. Team ACT shows up. We decide to fight in front of my house right now, and I cross my fingers Tyranitar doesn't send stones through it, only for them to actually give us a second to like, hey, go find the truth real quick while we pretend that you guys, oh no, they weren't home, and I guess we couldn't walk in because of property right rules. Until finally we reach the fugitive section of our particular case here as we reach Lapis Cave. Also, they've caught up to us, so we got to go in. I always find it fun that they hint at the Kangaskhan rock right there and then just never talk about it. We just walk right past it and continue on with this dungeon. Lapis Cave, I'll be honest, one of my favorite dungeons because it's very easy. Not necessarily for any like real like, oh wow, cool Pokemon or anything like that. It's just very easy, especially with the combination that we're at. I think our typing is pretty good. Level-wise, it's good. It's generally not complicated to deal with, and we just zoom through Lapis Cave. No issues whatsoever at Lapis Cave as they rush through, only to get to what is easily the most complicated dungeon right there, Mount Blaze. Difficulty spikes indeed. Mount Blaze has always been a problem for me, and while we do have a water type, Moltres is not going to be easy enough to just beat by type advantages. So, Mount Blaze requires a lot of strategy, a lot of planning, and a lot of move management as we go through the dungeon itself. Not too concerned about the dungeon, especially because of type matchups and everything like that. We store our items, we save the game, but now it's the hard part. We're going through Mount Blaze now, and again, lots of fire types, lots of rock types. I'm not going to be much of a help here. The only moves I've got are normal type moves and fire type moves, so that's not going to be helpful for most of the Pokemon we'll see in this particular dungeon. Um, and then Pokemon that have like Flash Fire aren't going to be helpful either. It's just a whole big mess. Squirtle, on the other hand, could be, hopefully, very impactful. Bubble, Water Gun, just Water-type moves galore could be very helpful. On top of that, we're finding enough bands here that we can start to set ourselves up with either a power or special band, depending on the situation. I think the current setup I have right now, Squirtle's got the special band, I've got the power band, because I tend to be using more of those physical moves. Squirtle tends to be using more of those water-type special moves. Reminder, this is, if I'm not mistaken, before the physical special split, and so that's something that we can take advantage of, potentially the little, not glitches, but like manipulation setup that we could theoretically work with that particular setup. I also have to make sure I don't walk on the fire, which could be very easy, like I do here. I have to make sure that I don't send Squirtle into the fire, because if I do, then Squirtle not only disappears into a different location, but also gets burned. So I gotta watch my step quite literally here as we continue forward. Again, Mount Blaze is the dungeon part. I'm not concerned about it. It's the higher stages and, of course, Moltres that I'm very worried about. Did I say rock types previously? I might have said rock types. I didn't mean rock type Pokemon. I meant rock type moves, like Rock Throw, which will deal a lot of damage and then knock me out right there. Well, that's Smog, but, problems. That's what I'm worried about. We are able, however, to get to the middle point, that one hiccup withstanding, and proceed forward to Mount Blaze Peak. Now, the peak, depending on how you end up getting lucky, like this is very lucky. This is great for us in terms of like getting to the boss very quickly. The problem is, can we beat the boss? And that I'm not as sure about. We've got a lot of gummies, which could be helpful. I tend to use IQ skills. Strategy-wise, this isn't beneficial when you come to like speed running, because you prefer to get frustration, which obviously we're not going for because I can't use TMs. This is all based on natural moveset. So we're going to try to fight Moltres with this setup here. Now, Moltres, notoriously, at least for me, very difficult to fire type here. We have the water type moves, but Moltres has a lot of health, and we don't have easy ways of lowering their defenses, or special defenses in particular. So we're kind of just trying to go with what we've got here. Let's see what we can do. We start with the Gravel Rock. That's always good, 20 points of damage right there. And from here, Growl to lower the attack. We scratch for like a pitiful amount of damage. Agility means they can go twice. They go Agility Ember, knocking us out with 70 points of health. So it's not great. We're not going to get anywhere close to 70 health points. By leveling up, we do increase our defenses, meaning that 70 turns into maybe 68 instead. However, it's still going to be hard to deal with. We're not going to get enough levels just based on this run through, or just going through, the peak for a long time. The burn, obviously not helpful there either. We're not going to be able to gain those levels enough to the point where we can tank an Ember for either of us, because both of us are resistant, and probably both of us will get knocked out. So now it becomes important to find out our strategy here. We could get lucky with items, right? There's a chance we can get like knocked out there. Obviously, that's not beneficial. There's a chance that we could get beneficial with like Reviver Seeds, or maybe like a Link Box, perhaps, to being able to link just all of our moves together and just blast them with a bunch of attacks. That withstanding, though, we're kind of stuck here. The Fury Attack's also never good. Never good. Nobody likes Fury Attack in this generation as well, because it's a really good move. So now it just kind of becomes finding our strategy here, right? Worst case scenario, we have to go through a bunch of times, or go through for a long time. Or we could, get into a situation like this where 4 Pokemon show up and get knocked out. In fact, this is going to happen quite a bit here. I am purposely not showing you all of the fails. I'm just going to show you a snippet of them. Of course, I'm keeping track on my end here. There are a lot. Here's another example. Ember here, Fury Attack, knockout. Fury Attack's doing 30 points of damage. That's 2 Fury Attack hits is a knockout, and Fury Attack can hit up to 5 times. In fact, why don't I just show you another example here? First off, we're trying to run away from a Pokemon that can potentially Fury Attack us, only for me to try to set this up properly. I'm like, hey, maybe we should do this, and this will be beneficial. Yeah, only for me to get Fury Attacked here. I was greedy, tried to get experience points, did not work. So, I'm not going to show you all of these different fails here, just know that there are a lot of them. Now, while I won't show you in-dungeon fails, I will show you some of the boss fights that we go through. So here's an attempt with Moltres. Let's see if this one's any better. We've got a different strategy, maybe, in mind, at the very least. We're going to try, again, this is only our second Moltres fight, so maybe, we can get a little bit luckier. Maybe the, strategy we had initially planned could work. We've got a couple of gravel rocks here we can throw. Growl, Scratch does 14 points of damage. Fire Spin here, 61 knockout. Okay, so maybe not the best strategy there. After a few more dungeon knockouts, we get another shot at Moltres. Let's see if we can get a little bit luckier on this try here. First strategy, of course, I set a bubble because we're going to try to slow down Moltres. I think that's the easiest way to go. We Growl here to lower your attack. Growl, Scratch does 14. Bubble, 31. 15 points there. Scratch again. Bubble again. 15 points again. We can take one more hit. Bubble, Fire Spin, Knockout. Problem is, we can survive an A attack or two. We can't survive any of the moves. Our next Moltres fight is a very quick one here. We Growl. We go Growl again. We Bubble. We Fire Spin. Almost knocked out. Maybe we could take advantage of the torrent ability there. Woo, look at that. Though it's not very helpful. We can't knock him out. So a few more attempts go by. I'll be honest. I'll let you know right now. This Moltres attempt doesn't work. We've gone through Moltres a couple of times. We've gotten knocked down a couple of times. It's clear right now we're not getting lucky. We don't have the strength necessary. We don't have the ability necessary. We're in a tricky situation here. So you feel free to listen or watch this fight. I don't know. This doesn't work, I'll tell you that. And so it's very clear, Moltres, very hard to deal with. In fact, it's so hard to deal with that our strategy right now is clearly not working. We can't take a single hit. The only way we can get a little bit better, though, is by leveling up. And so that's what we eventually try to do. We're going to go back here, we return to the entrance, we restore all our items. A good thing to note, we keep all of the items that we've had. So I store all of this stuff, and my decision right now is to just literally, after saving our game, we're going to go through the rock tunnel. This is the equivalent to going through the dojo here, the rock path, sorry. Just trying to get a little bit of levels, trying to see if we can get a little bit beneficial. I've saved as well, so we're kind of stuck in this position anyway, but maybe we can get a couple of levels, we can fight some Pokemon, get a little bit of stats going here, because while we're still level 13, 15 right now, we did see that a lot of damage is in that like high 50, low 60 range. So if we can tank one hit of a move, that could be beneficial if we end up with Oran Berries or other items like that. We get the defenses we need to at least be able to handle the hit. That could be the strategy we go with. So we're just continuing forward, trying to train up. We get stuck in this little corridor here. Obviously, only one Pokemon can attack at a time. I don't have any Gravel Rocks here. Zubat shows up. Leech Life does 18 points of damage. That shows how bad our defenses are. And we get knocked out. When we're getting knocked out in the rock path, it's a sign that clearly it's not the strategy to go. So let's go into Mount Blaze and try to continue doing some training there. Again, we're level 13 and 15 right now. We'll eventually reach the end of the dungeon where we will be, hopefully, a little bit better. We've reached the peak now, but we're at 14-15, which means Squirtle's probably very close to leveling up, and we're certainly on our path to getting to level 15 as well. Again, the increased defenses, the increase in health, and also being able to deal a little bit more damage could be the difference that we need to be successful against Moltres. Now, of course, in order to do this, we need to obviously gain a little bit more experience as well, but this could be the difference that we need for Moltres. In fact, as we reach the second floor here, we're going to get another shot at Moltres. Let's see if this is the difference. Now, we are the same stat-wise, so it's maybe not the best situation, right? So we're same stats as we typically are when we're fighting Moltres, but maybe just another run-through, a new set of items, perhaps, could be the beneficial things that we need for Moltres finally to be over with. Let's try it. Moltres comes down from the heavens above, the fire that's going upwards for some reason. Here they are. Moltres, let's fight. Again, strategy in mind, we go for a nice little step back here. That was clearly not the strategy. Oh no, I've messed up. Maybe this will be slightly successful. We get things slightly finished, a little bit better there. I don't know why I stepped back, I'll be honest. That kind of just threw me off. It threw myself off. Bubble does a little bit more damage. The wing attack knockout for 42 points, but we know we can survive a wing attack. That's something, right? Many attempts through the dungeon later, that's a feint to Moltres. On my very next attempt, this happens, and so I decide, you know what, let's just start from the beginning. We'll try going through the dungeon again. We store our items, we walk in, let's go through Mount Blaze, see if we can level up a little bit more this time. A second run through of Mount Blaze, and the main dungeon itself should get us to at least a 15-16 combination of levels. That, hopefully, is enough for us to be able to finally get through what has taken me hours of real-life gameplay, or hours of real life, and then also an hour plus of gameplay. We have spent way too many. When you see the final total of feints, most of them are coming from Mount Blaze and Mount Blaze alone. So we're going to see, maybe going through the dungeon again, if this can be at least a little bit better, because we're still losing to Pokemon in the dungeon itself, let alone getting to Moltres. So now it becomes just get the experience points we need. Maybe frustration could be useful. I'm frustrated right now. We'll try to find a way through this, at least see if we're a little bit better. We go through, finally get to the midpoint. I had to run until literally hunger was running low, just doing a little bit of additional training. We save our game and continue forward. Good news, we got into the 15-16 combination, meaning that we could probably tank an Ember by Moltres. I think. I'm pretty sure Bond could. I might be able to, especially with defense boosts and everything like that. So that, in conjunction with our boosted stats as well, could that be the difference that we need to finally get through Moltres? Well, the only way we'll be able to find out is by going through and actually getting to Moltres. Hopefully not knocking out to the Firo here. That would not be great. We get here. Let's set things up. We get the bubble set up. We've got a couple of items as well that could be interesting to use in a future playthrough or future run-through in case we lose. But let's try this. This is our third set of Moltres fights here. We went the initial set, went back down the mountain, climbed up. Second set, back down the mountain, climbed up. Third set here. We've got the highest level we've got. We've got the best stat situation we've got. It's time to see if it works. We growl here, obviously to help things up a little bit. I went for Ember. The stab seems to have been slightly better. Plus, we can take advantage of this here. Both of us are in the danger zone right now, but we get knocked out. So we're there, but we're not. We don't have enough health points, though, to be able to tank multiple hits. So we really need to make sure that we... Fury attack happens as well. In fact, this is going to happen a couple of times here. We struggle, actually, for the next few tries to actually get through the dungeon itself because of situations like this, where we get Ember, on one side and Arcanine Firo on the other, and just somehow struggle to get through. The Peck, significant damage as well. Charmander's defenses, I'll be honest, in this game, and I'm not sure if it's just based on level, it might be, or based on Fury attacks, which it might be, but we just struggled through this dungeon to get past any Firo at all. So, Firo quickly dropping down my list of favorite Pokemon because of them being meanie pantses. But eventually, after many attempts, we eventually, not this time, eventually get through. You might have been able to figure out the strategy I used for it. In fact, I showed it off and mentioned it earlier in this episode. What was that strategy that I used? Well, we have in our bag a specific item that could be really useful here. As we set things up properly here, preparing for it, it's that item at the very, very bottom. The link box. That's right, we decided to go through with the ultimate strategy of linking all the moves. Just all of them. We link them all. We link Growl, Metal Claw we've got now, and link that in conjunction. It's a little hard for me. I've never linked moves. I don't link moves frequently in general. Initially, my thought is just Growl and Metal Claw here, Scratch and Ember. Now let's just combine them all. We've got one giant move of Growl, Metal Claw, Scratch, Ember. In conjunction with our Water-type partner here, this has to be it. Because frankly speaking, we have broken Charmander as a concept in general. Does this officially work? Does it work on this try? Do I need to go through the dungeon again? Well, let's find out. First things first, though. Do I even go for the Growl? I don't. I just skip my move there. Now, here we go. We Growl. Metal Claw for 20. Scratch for 16. Ember misses, though. Bubble does 32. I take A attack damage. All right. So far, so good. We're able to boost our attacks a little bit as well with Metal Claw. Growl there. Metal Claw there. Scratch. Ember for significant damage there. Massive damage from the attack by Bond. Meaning that eventually, with all of these stat boosts here, we get advantage of our Blaze. The attack on Squirtle is critical here. We go through all of this, the bubble, for the knockout. We win, finally. I don't know how long that took. I'm editing this as I go through the video, so I'm personally not sure how long the Mount Blaze section is of this video, but I'm assuming it's much longer than it needs to be. Ultimately, though, we are successful. We did beat Moltres, thankfully, and now we can go through with a completely busted version of Charmander, trying to get through the rest of this game. Now, here's the thing. I have to keep this going. I mean, I could unlink the moves with a separate link box or try to use it. I'm not going to do that for multiple reasons. One, using a link box outside of the dungeon, I'm not even sure if that's possible off the top of my head, but even if it was, that would feel like using a move outside of the dungeon, which I'm kind of iffy on in general. I could bring it into a dungeon, but again, feeling iffy on that in general. Second thing, because again, I carry link moves moving forward. Second thing, it's a different type of strategy that we're playing now as we're going through into the cold areas here. It's a different type of strategy we're playing with because now I have this very, very powerful 4-move combo here. But I can only use it a limited amount of times, meaning going through the dungeon now is going to be even harder. We have to find max elixirs in the dungeon. We have to prepare for this. Um, and remember, there's a boss fight at the end of this, so there's a decent chance we'll have to use the busted move at the end anyway when fighting against Articuno. Frosty Forest, we go in. I've got the move ability, at least with Ember. I can definitely, that in conjunction with the Metal Claw and just the fact that it's an overpowered move, means that I feel like I have a shot at being useful. But I'm going to have to rely on the A attack a lot and hope that my partner is able to do some distance damage to at least chip things down. Hope I find some items that are useful here. Frosty Forest has quickly gotten a little bit more complicated than I thought it needed to be because of this effective cheat code I used to be able to beat the dungeon. It's making things a little bit harder. The max elixir there, though, very critical. Gravel rocks will be critical as well as we try to get through Frosty Forest again with this weird setup. After a couple of more missed opportunities going through the dungeon, we eventually reach the end of Frosty Grotto, where our good old ice friend Articuno is here. Now, Articuno, the hardest of the three birds, in my opinion, with the room-wide move of Powder Snow, and Moltres itself being complicated means we have to prepare very carefully. Gravel Rock for damage here. I go for the Growl, Metal Claw, Scratch, Ember combination to deal some decent damage. Water Gun, Squirtle's going to be less effective in this one because it can't deal super effective damage. We're the one that has the super effective damage. Agility sucks because that means that it can go multiple times per turn, meaning that we really need to do a lot of damage here. The Mist, not helpful either because that means our Growls and Leers and other things like that aren't going to be beneficial, and the Gust eventually knocks us out. But there is a chance. I felt a little bit better about that run than I did with 95% of the Moltres runs. So maybe there's a shot that we can be successful if we just get the right set of combination of moves and abilities there. There's a Matang with a Reviver Seed, so maybe that we can pick that up if we can find it as well. Bond, of course, in the previous run through. I'm actually going through. I find another Reviver Seed, which could be helpful. Again, Reviver Seeds, if are a little weird about how I play them. I count them, but I don't count them, but I do count them, but I don't. I'm not bringing them in, but if I find them, then they sort of count, I suppose. Still not 100% sure how I feel about Reviver Seeds. But at the very least, if we use them, we use them. If we don't, we don't. So let's find out if we use them or not as we continue forward, again, going through, finding the stairs eventually, and getting through to fighting against Articuno. We reach the Frosty Grotto, and again, it's now another attempt at Articuno. Let's see if we're a little bit more successful this time. Now, we have an idea in mind. We felt a little luckier about it this time for the first attempt than we did with most of the Moltres ones. So now we've got a different set of moves as well, or items as well. Slightly different there. Gravel Rock Agility sucks, but we can get the Growl off, do some significant damage here. The Tail Whip Tackle on Squirtle helps because we can get that in before the Mist. And so that's where I'm trying to change our strategy a little bit. Water Gun for a drop in damage. The Gust does not knock out Squirtle, meaning that we can get one more set of hits going in. Water Gun for big damage there. Torrent knocks us out. We end up using a Reviver Seed there, but that just makes us that much easier because now we have a fully powerful Bond here, getting the knockout on Articuno. So, technically a Reviver Seed used. We picked it up in the dungeon. We didn't bring it in, but it still counts as a Reviver Seed. I note that down in terms of difficulty when it comes to ranking, but at the very least, Articuno is done. We can continue forward from here, progressing through the story. No more big boss battles to deal with. Only one more dungeon before we return back home, and I can reset my moves to not have this overpowered monstrosity that will not be very effective when going through into the longer dungeons that you certainly know will be occurring in the future. For now, though, it's time for Mount Freeze. Now, while they call the dungeon Mount Freeze, I'll be honest, you could honestly call it Mount Dragon-type Pokemon Show Up a lot because, well, Dragon-type Pokemon show up a lot. Sure, there are your Ice types as well, but there's like Shieldgon here. Of course, a very famous Dragon-type that evolves into a Salamence, which is a Pokemon I do not want to see anytime soon, though I will eventually have to. And then Swablu, which evolves into Altaria, again, a Pokemon I do not want to see anytime soon, though at least Swablu I'm a little bit better about. Of course, you do have your Ice types, your Seals, for example. I think Swinub or Piloswine is in this dungeon as well, making it a little bit more like the Mount Freeze that we expect. Nevertheless, though, no boss battle here. As long as we can get through the dungeon, we'll be fine. With one hiccup against a Zangoose Fury Cutting, There you go. That's better. With one hiccup there, we're able to reach the peak of Mount Freeze. You might notice, or you'll eventually notice if you haven't already, besides the fact that a bunch of Glalie are chasing after us, we're actually, I did a little thing where I broke apart my moves. I just used them until they eventually broke apart on their own, meaning that all we have to do is go back to Gulpin and then eventually link them together. With the no boss battle in this particular dungeon, it's not as big of a deal. And we've got the Bite here, which could be helpful. Bite, I think, is a little bit better in terms of type matchups and slight differences there compared to Water Gun. Plus, Bubble has the bonus effect of being able to at least, slow a Pokemon down. So I keep the Bubble, get rid of a Water Gun, replace it with Bite, and we eventually, again, Glalie, I'm pretty sure Glalie is the only Pokemon you can find at the peak here, which makes it very fun to constantly fight against. Eventually, though, we get to the stairs and reach the peak of Mount Freeze. Of course, Absol's here as well. They show up in and out. Team ACT shows up. A lot of story happens here, but effectively all of us fight against each other. Ninetales shows up and it's like, hey, Ahdurin, you're not the human. Thumbs up, go home. And so, with all of that done, we can finally go home and relax. Jeez. After fighting against Moltres for 10 hours, that's not legit. It was very close, maybe. I don't know. I can actually check, but I haven't yet. We can go home, relax, deal with regular things while Team ACT deals with some sort of world-ending threat that may or may not occur. While Team ACT is dealing with the Groudon threat, we've got to deal with our own threat, a couple of Mankeys in Uproar Forest. So, with a nice relaxing task, we continue through with this. Now, the big thing, of course, is the end of the dungeon, whether or not we get a little lucky with the extra chestnuts, or we get a little unlucky with no chestnuts. This dungeon, though, pretty easy, safe to say. There aren't too many complications there. In fact, we've set up our moves back a little bit, so it's normal at least, or at least normal to what I'm expecting and want to use going forward. The fact that there's a bunch of grass-type Pokemon here as well makes it that our Ember is at least going to be beneficial. It's not going to, be a problem to deal with. We're also defensive enough at this point where we can start to take the hits, meaning that it's not too big of a deal, although we have to watch out for like an odd earthquake here or there. Eventually we get through the dungeon, though. We're nice, easy situation. And good news, we found a chestnut. Bad news, it's only the one, meaning, of course, we've got to go through the dungeon one more time. I'm not going to show all of that because this is probably a step down in terms of difficulty as long as you don't get, hit by a bite or hit by a random earthquake here or there. This is, however, the first dungeon that Monster House is going to occur, which could be a little problematic to deal with. We just got to hope we get a little lucky about that. Will we? Well, based on how this playthrough has been going so far, what do you think when it comes to that Monster House luck? Yep, there it is. It's a Monster House. On the bright side, it's not too many Pokemon, so it's actually not terrible. And the fun part is Earthquake actually does a lot of damage to the enemies as well. So we don't honestly have to worry about that too much. And in fact, what we gotta do is just run around in circles for a little bit, grab this little Poke, walk around, try to deal a little bit of damage here and there, see if we can take advantage of the burn, doing additional damage. We find the stairs, and we proceed forward, meaning we got through the Monster House. All's well that ends well, you know what I mean? That is, of course, until you reach floor 8, where we find another Monster House. That's right, 2 Monster Houses in 3 floors in the same dungeon. And this one, at least, is going to be a little bit more complicated. Of course, any of these C-Dots could use Earthquake, which could be very bad for me personally, like there, right, for example. Though it does deal damage to the enemies as well, which is slightly beneficial. At any point in time, we could probably get knocked out by a random earthquake here or there. There's a Bide as well, meaning that we got to make sure that we have to worry about that dealing a lot of damage. Bide there, meaning we have to make sure we knock out you, which we don't, meaning it knocks out Squirtle. We could have gotten past that too. That was just a mistake on my part. On the next run through, we find yet another Monster House, this time on the 3rd floor. I'll save you the time. This one we don't survive either. Just too many Venonats using Confusion, making me randomly attack everywhere. Squirtle eventually gets confused. Not a fun experience. That's another Uproar Forest feint. Like, we've had multiple. This is not typically a dungeon you get fainted a lot. This is really making me wonder if I'm underleveled. And this one's even worse. On the 1st floor here, because Squirtle is getting a combination of cringed and scratched and all that, we faint there as well. Making me really wonder, are we significantly underleveled? Because honestly, I think we might be, which could be problematic. Though, we'll go through Uproar Forest one more time, see if we can get a little successful here. If not, we're going to go to the dojo and probably train until we're level 30, because that might honestly have to be the case that we have to go through. However, though, we are able to get through the dungeon. Like I mentioned, we only found the one chestnut, meaning we'll have to go through the dungeon again. But for now, we can at least take advantage of the fact that this is going to be a very, very simple fight. In fact, this is so simple, I'm not even bothering to actually do any of the attacks. I'm just eating gummies here, um, which I find very, very funny. I'm not going to lie. I just eat all the gummies we've got. Meanwhile, partner does most of the damage there. And finally, we get a little knockout there. Finally getting through what was remarkably difficult. Again, I think we're under-leveled. Hopefully going through Upper Forest again gets us a little bit more experience, and then the missions that we do get us more experience as well. But, this is raising alarms for me that the first run-through didn't have. Now, I'm not necessarily sure if it's because of level or because the the Charmander-Squirtle combination isn't as great as the Machop-Trico one. We'll see. Of course, in the next few dungeons is where a lot of time can be saved or lost. So, we'll hold on to this idea here and continue forward. We zoom through the dungeon this time. You can see our new house here and the wonderful face that's there. This time, much quicker than the previous one, making me feel a little bit more confident, at least, that we're finally starting to get a little better when it comes to levels and experience. But for now, we've got a couple of missions to do. We've got things to cut off here. We've got our jobs and all that sort of stuff that we got to get through before the next plot point occurs. So we just jump straight through those. After some missions, of course, this team that is probably not well constructed to fight against Groudon goes out, and we continue with our own missions for at least a little bit more time, again, gaining that experience that we crucially need. Then the following day, when they struggle to get through the dungeon itself, they come back only to get motivated by Bond here with a nice little motivational speech. We get prepared, get ready to go, because now it's time for the big dungeons, the final fights. We have to go through Magma Cavern, and then eventually, Sky Tower. Sky Pillar, the big one. The one that's problematic, anyway. First things first, though, Magma Cavern. We're sort of built for it. This is the dungeon that has those fire and rock-type combinations there, which we could theoretically do well with. Squirtle, of course, is going to be very helpful for that. We are a little under-leveled, though. Will we need those levels, or can we get through without an issue? This was where things started to get really complicated for the Machop-Trico combination. Will it be the same here? Well, I'll tell you right now, if this is any indication, this is certainly going to be a problem. We get quick attacked by that Raticate up there, we get ganged up on by two different sides, and a Poison Sting that deals 46 points of damage knocks me out. Yeah, we're not in the best situation here. Let's try another attempt through, perhaps? Okay, so here's the thing. I could show you each of the different fails before I change my mind about going through the dungeon, separately by snippets, or I could show you this screenshot here. Every single cut is a failed attempt. This is about 15-20 minutes worth of content, as in, after there, but this is also sped up, so that means it's multiplied by the factor. I think it's 2.5 times speed. And on top of that, this probably is about an hour of recording, give or take, probably even more than that. So you get the gist. This is not exactly the greatest situation here, because this also cuts out on all of the time to restart the game and travel back down and go through the little cutscenes here and there. So yeah, you can tell we don't have to go through all this. You can get the gist. Especially after this here, a monster house on the 8th floor with so many different Pokemon, and me already not being at particularly high health to begin with, this sort of implies, hey, Ahdurin, you should probably go train up a little bit. And so that's what I do. Sure enough, we go through to the dojo, we go into the Dragon Maze, which is, in my opinion, the one that gives the most experience or bang for your buck, I suppose. It's also one that we can get through pretty easily, I think, especially at this point. And so we just go through the dungeon. You can see we start off at level 17, 19, just jumping into 18. We go through the dungeon a few times until eventually we get to this point right about here. As we're finishing this dungeon here, again going through, we are now leveled 20 and 21 respectively. I've also learned the move Rage, which could be interesting. Rage, of course, is a move that does a little bit of damage there, but when you're attacked, you actually get a boost in your own attack. So as you can see here, my attack is getting boost once I use Rage. This could be really, really helpful, especially since I use a lot of physical moves. We got the Metal Claw, we've got the Scratch, the Growl, of course, lowering their attack isn't as big of a deal. But this could be interesting. I've turned and shifted myself into almost becoming a physically attacking Pokemon while my partner has turned into sort of a mixed thing, though they specialize, I suppose, in the special attacking side of things. We've sort of finalized that here. You can notice I got rid of Ember in the process because Ember, in my opinion, isn't going to be really beneficial for the big bosses against Groudon or against Rayquaza in particular. And Rage is helpful in the dungeons itself, as multiple Pokemon can come at you at once. The boss battle probably not as big, though we could certainly use it to use up a turn and or get it set up in the process there. Going through the dungeon as well, we can take advantage of the Rage to have it on effect for a little bit of time as well. So with that in mind, also getting the X-ray specs, which could be interesting. We can switch back and forth between those and try to plan out where we want to go and how we want to approach. We try to go through the dungeon again. I'll let you know right now, we don't keep those X-ray specs. We eventually lose in this dungeon. But with a higher level, with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more preparation, a slightly different move set as well, we could be in a place where we can actually get through the dungeon. That's the big thing, right? After about 5 or so more failed attempts, I go back to the dojo, train up a little bit more. We're now level 22 and 23. And now we're 23. We've also finally balanced out that discrepancy I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. No longer really going to be a case going forward. We finally caught up to Squirtle here, which means, balancing numbers, I suppose, if you're a fan of that. I certainly am. And also, better stats. We've got a little bit more health. We've got a little bit more power in our moves as well. Certainly something we can take advantage of here. At the very least, we can take on Nidokings without as much of a concern, though I certainly don't want to face one if I don't have to. I'm also recording at this point because this is the time. This is when we actually get through the dungeon properly. The magnitudes that we had to deal with, especially by the Pokemon later on, Raticates just in general being annoying, the Nidokings and Queens poisoning us, meaning that we've got to certainly take additional time to find our place and get through and everything like that. All that, just gone. We finally get through. We're able to get through this dungeon, and now it becomes an interesting point because we have to face, of course, not only getting through that first floor with the Steelixes and Onyxes that seemingly are overpowered for some reason, we also have to find out how to beat Groudon. Because, getting through the dungeon is one thing. We got to get to Groudon. That itself is going to be another hassle to deal with. That's right, we got through on this attempt, even with this Monster House here. That's right, we got through against the Monster House. The sheer volume of Golems and Rhydons and ground-type Pokemon that I'm terrified about. Rage, very, very useful when it comes to the monster houses because we're constantly getting attacked, right? So we've got a super effective move user by Squirtle. I've got Rage, meaning that I constantly can take the hits effectively, getting the boost in attack every single time. And we got Growl, which means that everybody's attack is lowering a little bit, plus a Scratch does a little bit of bonus damage there, especially with our boosted attack as well, meaning that we can get through even ignoring the rock-type damages that everybody's dealing. Fury attack isn't doing much damage as well thanks to all these Growls that we keep using, and so we just keep on going. Despite even losing the bubble, we're not taking much damage there. My partner, again, much more defensive than I am, so while it's 1 point of damage for them, it's like 5 or 6 for me. But despite all this, we're able to get through. In fact, let's just show off how we get through this continuing forward. It's a little bit of strategy involved, of course, but we've got the Metal Claws. We actually have Scary Face here, which could be intriguing. I think about it for a second, and after some more deliberation, I actually decide, yep, that's right, getting rid of Rage. Little risky here, because Rage is, I've just literally proved in this Monster House alone how useful it is, but Scary Face for the bosses could be really helpful. And of course, if we go back to the beginning of this dungeon, we can just start off with Rage again. We'll eventually get a chance to learn Scary Face, but I think, for one, this could be the attempt. I still got the effect of Rage going on at the very least for this immediate floor. But on top of all of that, I think Scary Face could be really useful for Groudon and Rayquaza because that speed move thing. We've got Bubble on Squirtle's side. We've got Scary Face on my end. Both of those could be helpful when it deals with getting your foe to do as little as possible, right? Skipping every single turn they've got could be helpful as well. But eventually, yes, we do get through this. We got Scary Face as well. We're now both level 25, meaning we're in that high 70s, low 80s when it comes to our health. We've got defenses that are pretty decent as well. And we've got a bunch of throwable items which could be useful for both the Groudon fight here. Well, actually, just for the Groudon fight here, because the Rayquaza one, we can't bring them in. The good thing with Groudon, we only have one floor we have to do again if we end up losing to them. So, first attempt. Here we go. Here's how we do this. First things first, I'm going to set it up so that partner uses the Leer tackle combination to lower defenses, get those, Leer in this case is Tail Whip, I Scary Face second time ends up working, meaning that Groudon's slowed. They can only move every other turn. That's helpful. We're doing a lot of damage on these physical attacks that we're dealing as well. 50, 60 points of damage. Slash isn't doing much as well, especially with our growls. And then we succeed. We end up winning. First attempt, able to get through Groudon without a problem. Scary Face, incredibly helpful for this. Now the hardest part becomes that final dungeon we have to deal with. The pillar in the sky. How do we get through the dungeon, for one thing, because we no longer have Rage, meaning monster houses are going to be a lot harder. And two, getting through Rayquaza in the first place. Only way to find out how to do it is by trying it out. So, let us go up to the sky. We've reached Sky Tower. It's time to walk on in and try our first attempt. Now, Sky Tower, of course, just has a whole bunch of strong Pokemon. The early part of Sky Tower, to me, is probably the hardest, these first few floors. Not because of Lunatone, I mean, Lunatone's certainly a difficult Pokemon to deal with, but the number of Ghost-type Pokemon. We'll find them eventually, and when we do, they terrify us. For one thing, Shedinja itself is just kind of complicated in general, because it doesn't have a lot of health, but it certainly is annoying to deal with unless you have a super effective move like that Bite over there. Thankfully, we've got that, otherwise it'd be that much harder to deal with Shedinja, especially early on, because we don't have many throwables, because we gotta find them, obviously. But the Ghost-type Pokemon like Duskull and Shuppet are terrible to deal with. First off, Ghost-type Pokemon can go through the walls. You can't attack through the walls, meaning that they're effectively invincible while they're in there. If they get up out, first off, Nightshade, a move they use, a lot of damage. Curse, as you see there, a lot of damage. Spite is a move that they can use sometimes, which means that your power points are just depleted entirely. It's not even like a couple of points. You just lose your entire moveset. It's not fun. And plus, Ghost-type Pokemon, hard to deal with. Not many weaknesses. One thing they are weak to, however, is Bite, which we do have, making Shuppet and Duskull at least a little bit easier than when using Machop and Trico in our previous run-through. Then we still have to worry about like where we're located. We have to make sure we consistently move away so that we can deal with Shuppet. The Screech they've also got just drops our defenses by 2 stages, making it that much more of a worry. But we've got a setup here, meaning that at least it could be easier if we plan it out right. Do we plan it out right? Well, for one thing, at least, Nightshade certainly isn't very helpful here. I mean, consistent level damage, which is 27 in that case, knocks out Bond very quickly. We're also now a higher level than Bond. We're level 27, while they are 26 later on in the dungeon, as we gain experience points, obviously. So now we've got that flipped on its head. Now we're faster leveling than they are. But we're at least a little bit more confident. When I'm going through this dungeon, I feel a lot better about this than I did, say, in Mount Blaze, for example. Even with the curses and the complications that ghost types can have here, I mean, this is dealing significant damage. The knockoffs are just annoying as well. Despite all that, though, I feel pretty okay. I feel like we have a shot here. It's kind of those weird situations where you're stuck in a corner against a ghost type in the wall or something that are the ones that are really problematic. So I feel like we can get through the dungeon without too much of an issue. At least this first part. Of course, when we get to the top, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. And in fact, on this run-through, we're actually able to reach the midpoint of the tower. Clearly, we've reached a level that works for us. 28 for us, 27 for our ally Bond here. We're both in that mid-80s level of HP. We've got good stats as well. A lot of time invested into this, but now the game is running pretty smoothly. The question now is, A, can we reach the top of the summit against Pokemon like Aerodactyl using Wing Attack and Agility and all of these annoying things? And B, once we reach the summit, how easy or how difficult is Rayquaza going to be? First things first, we have to get through this, so let's see if we can, because these floors are always very, very spread out, I guess is a nice way of saying it. Annoying could be another way of saying it. And of course, the Pokemon that we have to deal with here are all extremely powerful, especially for where you are in the game. So, you know, Aerodactyls using Agilities and Tropiuses with Razor Leafs, Claydolls with Mud Slaps lowering accuracy, all this fun stuff is certainly something to worry about. Can we get through this on our first attempt? Also, we learn a move here. Protect. Wait a minute. This could be interesting. Having Protect could be very, very cool to have. And then Rayquaza as well. The bubble, not as impactful because we have the ability to slow down our ally, or slow down our enemies here with my Scary Face. So I get rid of Bubble and replace it with Protect. That means for a limited period of time at least, Squirtle won't be hit by any damaging moves. This could be the trick we need to at least have a strategy in mind for beating Rayquaza. So here's my idea, and I'll talk you through it as we run away and panic about these Aerodactyls here. So, if Rayquaza get slowed down, first of all. That means they're using a move every other turn, so that buys us time. On top of that, having the partner uses Protect means that any times that Rayquaza tries to attack the partner, it's basically just a wasted turn. So that, in conjunction with the slowing down, means that we could be skipping, at best case scenario, we could be having Rayquaza missing or wasting every other move, or every single move. It could potentially be as good as like 3 out of every 4 turns for us is a no-go for Rayquaza. This could be the trick that we need, because all we need to do is buy time. Once we can lower either the stats big enough, or we can get enough damage to finally get rid of Rayquaza. Of course, we have to get through the dungeon first off, and it seems like it's impossible to find the stairs here, so let's first try to do that, and also succeed in getting rid of all of these enemies as well, get the experience that we need, etc., etc. When we reach the 7th floor here, the stairs are here, and I use a special item that I found in this dungeon. First off, we do a little bit of manipulation of moves and items and all that fun stuff. The big thing, though, is looking at our movesets here. This is our final set, by the way. The big thing I have is a link box. Do I use this link box? Of course I will. Might as well. Who do I use it on is the question. And I decide to use it on, as we look in here, we use it on myself. Now I want to set this up properly. What I really want is to set it up so that we can have Growl, Metal Claw, and Scratch all connected like this. Now we have one move that is the Scary Face slowing down, and the other move is the damage dealing one. Also, the fact that I used it on the 7th floor shows that I forgot that the 8th floor actually existed, so I had to find the exit very quickly before wasting power points or moves or anything like that. I didn't want to use too much of it, so I just actually Scary Face there to try to slow them down, see if I can find the stairs in the process. But from here, eventually dealing, of course, with this Salamence, just trying to use the Iron Thorns and everything like that, we've got a strategy in mind. We can deal a bunch of damage with our big move, we can slow Rayquaza down with Scary Face, and our partner is going to be doing some protection to be able to ignore the damage that Rayquaza deals. Meaning, first attempt with Rayquaza, we have a shot, we have a strategy. It's going to take a little bit to get back here, so ideally we get it done on the first try. Let's see what we can do. Rayquaza versus us. Let's try this out. First things first, I set up the Protect because I want partner to use the Protect. Throw the Iron Thorn that we've got here. Now, it's time to get things started. I go for the Scary Face, slowing down Rayquaza. The Protect protects, obviously. We get hit on the first try. Not great. Ideally, we want Rayquaza to hit Squirtle, so we go for big damage here. Tackle, your turn to skip. We get a boost in our attack with the Metal Claw there. The miss on us is great. Protect is worn off. Now we're just going for full damage as much as we can. Crunch misses as well, and the knockout is done. 29 is our final level, I believe, or maybe it was 28, and we finally beat the game. Rayquaza's done. The question, though, how fast did we do this? Because there was a lot of time that we used up. Was this enough? Here's our final time, 5 hours, 21 minutes, and 4 seconds. Significantly slower than our previous pairing of Machop and Trico. The Mount Blaze, I think, honestly, looking back on it, was what really killed this run when it came to doing it fast. We were either very under-leveled or we just got really unlucky. Moltres is going to be, I think, going forward, the big lynch point of whether or not you can actually succeed, or the bottleneck, perhaps. That's the best way to describe it, using business terms here. Once you can get past Moltres, the rest of the game seems like it's not terrible, but you kind of, well, depending on the setup, of course, or at least the teams we've used so far, kind of over-level themselves against that Moltres-Articuno pairing in particular, and once you get past that, then the rest of the game becomes remarkably easy. The Charmander-Squirtle pair, I'll be honest, in my personal opinion, when using it, not as great as the Machop-Trico pairing. On top of that, looking through and going through how I feel about using the different movesets, I definitely have the feeling that lowering your opponent's defenses is going to be a lot better than lowering your opponent's attack. This might be the trend, I think, in general. I'm unsure about competitive, main series Pokemon in particular, but at least in this game, it feels like, especially when linking moves, you really want to lower your opponent's defenses, then attack them in that defensive territory. So typically it's going to be that physical attacking side of things, like the Leer, Tackle, for example, or Leer, would be easier. Leer, Scratch, maybe it was in the previous run. That combination, I think, definitely better off than the combination of lowering attack. It has its own benefits, certainly, especially because that makes it easier for you to survive longer. But in situations where you're under-leveled, like the early parts in the game, like most of these speedruns tend to be in actuality, you probably want to lower your opponent's defenses and then immediately attack them afterwards, because you're kind of playing the game like a glass cannon in essence. Um, so that's definitely something I want to see if that continues going forward. Speaking of going forward, go ahead and leave in the comment section below any pairings that you really want to see. The first two that we've done, the previous run through and this one, I did on my own, just kind of running through and randomly going through the quiz legitimately and then picking a partner that I just felt like would be fun. But going forward, I'm going to be pulling the responses from the videos and getting the most popular ones there. So typically, it'll be the most popular one in this run through will likely be the one that I use 2 run throughs from now. So I'll keep like a barrier there. On top of that, I don't really have a schedule when it comes to uploading these. Ideally, I wanted to do these every Saturday. That's clearly not the trend considering it's been multiple weeks since the last one came out. So that could be something that's a big thing going forward. So that about wraps it up here. Thank you everyone for listening, watching, and supporting in any way, shape, or form that you do. And until next time, take care.